who were thinking about approaching Andre Norton, Paul
People
Anderson.
like Andre Norton, Paul Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 2 or 3 names that don't come to mind right now, but
all the names are women except for Aspirin and Anderson.
Alan Wold. There seem to be more women writing fantasy than there are men writing fantasy, which is not to say that there aren't men writing fantasy, but there just seems to be the scale tipping a little bit in that direction. So I think by sheer statistics we're getting more women in this.
I think fantasy is a thing of the heart and the soul, and it's all tied in with symbols, and I think women are keeper of symbols far more than men are.
As a male poet said, only those things the heart believes are true. Let me go back to the roots for a minute. When you decided to do ElfQuest originally, and you sat down and costed out or figured out how to do Volume 1, Number 1, that must have been quite a gamble.
Oh.
Well,
I mean, because that's a whole new thing. Creating a new comic or a new illustrated magazine, whatever you want to call it, is not an easy job.
We didn't know it was impossible when we did it.
Right.
Because I didn't know, right.
It was a gamble in more ways than that, because when we started, we didn't want to publish it.
Right.
The idea of publishing was a very scary thought, and we thought that we could sell it to somebody else or license it to somebody else, and so we went looking. And none of the mainstream major publishers, Marvel and DC in particular at the time, thought it was commercial enough, so they declined. We finally did find a small publisher in the Midwest who did manage to publish the first issue, but we were disappointed with the production values on that, and we were fed up with certain problems that we'd been having with that publisher, so we said, look, the heck with this, we're going to go on our own. And so actually the first issue that we published was ElfQuest number 2. But by that time, we had done a little bit of homework, and we'd called up printers, and we'd talked to a few people who were publishing their own magazines, and, what's it like doing this? And they said, you have to take this, and you have to put up with that. And we said, well, what the heck? You want it done right, we're going to do it ourselves. So we had to borrow money to do the first issue. Luckily, we had distribution as a result of issue number 1, which did get distributed. And we had to borrow money to do it. We paid the printer. We got paid by the distributors. We paid back the loan inside of a month, and we've never looked backward from there.
And now it's becoming a little industry. I saw a couple of video games outside.
Not so little anymore.
We had hopes that it would be well accepted when we started off. I don't think either of us thought that it was going to grow the way it has. But as you've seen, there are the comics, there are the color volumes, there's the novel, there are going to be 2 games, a role-playing and a board game. There are the little gaming figurines. There will be an animated film. There are T-shirts. There is going to be merchandising and licensing.
So
And the
that's
most-
for pewter statues, yeah.
Right.
The most delicious irony of all is that when we were taking the idea for ElfQuest around originally to different publishers, naturally we went to Marvel and DC first. And understandably, and we have never held this against them, they thought it was a little bit too offbeat and not commercial enough, so they didn't want to gamble on it.
It's like the guy at M&M's who turned down E.T.
I know.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
So when we finish our 20-issue run of the black and white comic, Marvel will then reprint ElfQuest as a color newsstand comic.
All right. Okay. I hope you held them up for lots of money.
Oh no, there's absolutely no rancor. As a matter of fact,
Not rancor, just
Just good business.
living
Well,
well is
yeah.
the best revenge.
Right.
The
One of my
irony-
favorite phrases.
There's a special irony in the scene in the X-Men where Kitty Pryde comes phasing through a roof and she's wearing an ElfQuest T-shirt.
Yeah, well,
Yes, it's just one of those things that when in the wee small hours when we're feeling tired, we think about that, and a little smile steals across our faces. And
That brings up something very interesting, because there are people who look to something like Star Trek or Star Wars as inspiration. When they feel down in the dumps, they go see Star Wars again. When they feel unsure about how the way their life is going, they look to these heroic examples, and
Absolutely.
they draw from that in order to do things right in their own life. And there are people today who, when things aren't right and they don't know what to do, they look at ElfQuest.
yes.
and they draw from that whatever they need to go on and do what they have to do.
Well, that's because ElfQuest is taking another risk in its storytelling, not just in its production. And that risk is to have some really very basic values and to stick to them. Along with the shattering of prejudices, which is one of the main themes of our story, we try to put forth a lifestyle which I suppose in certain ways would be difficult for humans to follow given the difference between elf and human biology, but we try to put forth a philosophy of living that we feel is worthy of serious consideration. The idea of...
there does seem to be a different attitude toward marriage and family relations.
That's true. That's one of the trickier subjects that we deal with, but basically, you know, without trying to sound like a love child or a hippie, the basic philosophy we put forth is to ask questions, to try and understand first before you hit something or kick it in the backside and reject it openly.
That's one of the... I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to... Also, ElfQuest is quite unabashed. The characters, at least the ones that the core characters, the Wolf Riders, started out very innocent. They have lost much of that, but they still retain some of it. They are very unabashed and unafraid about expressing emotion, showing feelings. And I think in our society, it still is a stigma to do that. You don't cry, you don't express exuberance in the middle of the street. But when somebody goes to ElfQuest, they can see that happening and they can react to it unabashedly.
We've found that ElfQuest has a very cathartic reaction on people, even very repressed people, who come up to us and speak to us at conventions and so forth, and you can see that they've had a hard struggle socializing themselves. You can see what kind of pain it is to them just to relate to another human being, and you can see that the story has been some kind of catharsis for them.
In the written introduction to, I think both of the volumes, it is mentioned by several of the people that ElfQuest is largely autobiographical. How so?
Well.
Heavens, there are levels and there are levels. Certain of the events in ElfQuest are absolutely. There's a scene in which the lead character Cutter gets bitten by a squirrel that he has tried to rescue from drowning. And that is almost line-for-line analog to something that happened to me when I tried to do the same thing for the miserable thing.
Also, there's a scene with some fireflies in issue number 10 that actually happened to Richard and me. We came upon a field that was just full of these stars that had fallen from the sky.
Yes.
And it was wonderful.
But on a more symbolic level, someone once described ElfQuest as a self-quest, which we thought was a very profound thing to say. We hadn't thought of it. But as Wendy and I have done this over 7 years, we've grown in different ways. Our attitudes about different things have changed. And those changes are reflected in the storylines or in the thoughts of a given character or in what happens.
Yeah, our characters change. They're not static.
Well, that's one of the, I think, the most common themes in fiction. Star Wars is essentially the story of the growth into adulthood of Luke Skywalker. The common thread among many of Heinlein's novels is a young man who grows into adulthood and assumes responsibility. And that's, this is essentially the rising and advancing of Cutter.
Yes.
Cutter and Lita and Skywise, because there are all of the characters, to greater or lesser extent, are facets of us. Lita's fear of the eclipse reflects a certain feeling that Wendy has about the awesomeness of the universe.
I'm basically a primitive at heart. When the space shuttle is taking tickets, I'm going to be there waving bye-bye at Richard because he's going to go, I will never leave this planet in my entire life. I am rooted to the spot. It's the only roots I have. So,
the character growth is, I think, the key factor in what draws many people to ElfQuest. Cutter, you go back to that certain example again, is someone who his entire environment, his entire life history, the history of his entire tribe, the survival of the tribe is dependent on avoiding humans getting out of their way, killing them when necessary, but mainly just staying out of the way because they're poison. Yet it's Cutter who makes the decision to not kill. He will not kill today, to paraphrase another character. And he even gets, he doesn't really like them, but he gets to accept the differences and to accept humans.
The one thing that Cutter has, and this is what makes him the central character of the story, the leader of the quest, is that he's a visionary in spite of himself. He would love to spend his days with a full belly in a hollow tree, just swinging through the trees and having elf-type fun. But he has this vision and this need to see it through that he simply can't shake. He has an imagination. He can see beyond the needs of the moment, which I think is a very important facet for a leader to have, especially in troubled times. He has to be able to think not just and deal not just with the immediate problems, but to look ahead into the future and sort of project, well, since this event is happening now and it's going to change everything, what path must we now take? Cutter is doing something that, at least in the structure of our mythology for ElfQuest, no other elf has ever done.
Is this a quality you see Ember having when she becomes chief of the tribe?
Not necessarily. I don't know. She's pretty much like Bear Claw.
Yeah. It's a case in Cutter's example of a little learning turning out to be a very dangerous thing, because the learning came little by little and he cannot let go now.
And he's paying some very strong prices too.
Yeah.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is indeed.
So there.
Would you like to meet the humans that make up the group mind here? See if you have any fans out there. A couple. All right, I'm going to give the phone number. I think you have a question, right?
I got a whole bunch of questions.
Okay, well, you get to ask one of them while I tell people. If you want to speak with our guests, Wendy and Richard Pini, the telephone number is 985-5735. The area code, if you need it, is 213. Go ahead.
You have a large constituency. Are there ElfQuest cons, conventions?
There haven't been, but doggone it, we sure would love one if it did exist.
There have been a couple of aborted attempts, but
right, and we've gotten requests from a couple of convention organizers for conventions next year that would be predominantly ElfQuest oriented. So we will consider them as such. But no, we're actually
you want them
looking
to be officially sanctioned?
yeah, we're still looking forward to ElfCon 1.
ElfCon 1.
Yes, but beyond that, it's Elf World.
Elf
Oh
World.
yes,
If Disney could do it,
Of
we're going to do it.
Warp World.
Warp World.
Warp World.
Warp World?
Take the
Pini
Blue
World.
Mountain ride. Little
Yeah.
cars into Blue Mountain and ride through all the tunnels.
Sounds like
and
fun to
everything.
me.
Yeah.
Are we,
Cars have to be wolves.
Wolves, all right. The
is there a
wolves.
ride where you'll get levitated by Equar and
Why not?
okay.
Sure, that's
Warp
that.
World.
There you are. There's an artist question. Why not?
Trains,
Absolutely.
route rides.
Trains, woot rides.
Trains, woot rides. They're not horses, are they?
No.
They're not horses.
No,
They're just ugly and
mean.
stupid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which accounts as a resemblance to horses sometimes.
I guess. How much anatomy training have you had before you went into this?
Anatomy training.
Yeah.
In what respect do you mean that, sir?
Well, you didn't know this about us, but I knew
Okay.
her when she went to hospice. Back at the dawn of recorded
All right.
history.
And still you
no,
ask
no.
that question?
And still I ask that question. No. I mean, the characters, they're wearing clothes that show off their bodies, and it looks to me, with my untrained eyes, if all the muscles are in the right place.
The characters are drawn in a convincing manner. They are, however, highly exaggerated for natural anatomy. They are cartoons. They are caricatures of human form. But you see, in order to put that much exaggeration into the human form, you have to have a pretty good basic knowledge
And
of the structure of the human form. And the thing is, this is why so many fans have a lot of trouble drawing my characters. There are very few people who can really imitate my style very well, because they don't have enough knowledge of the structure of basic human anatomy to understand why these exaggerations work.
And you do. I mean,
Yeah.
have you been to
They're
art
hers.
school and things?
I've had no formal art training
Oh,
as
really?
such, but I've
Huh.
been drawing all my life, and eventually something's got to
It
click.
It
you
doesn't
know?
matter how or where you learn the rules.
Mhm.
You've still got to know them before you can bend them.
Absolutely.
That's true enough.
This is what I tell every kid who brings me his or her portfolio, because it's the first mistake I see is that they try to copy style
Yeah.
before they understand structure.
Right, right. Well,
Okay.
there's a problem like that with writing too. And I'm looking at the back. I'm looking at this picture of Two Edge, which is on the back of ElfQuest number 16, and there's a real Alex Raymond quality to
Oh,
this
really?
particular picture. Not the others necessarily, but this
It's
one.
interesting.
Maybe because he had some troll type people too.
Mm-hmm.
And this has got a look in the way the cross hatching is doing the coloring, and it's got sort of an Alex Raymond
you
look
have to
it.
remember the Two Edge isn't pure elf either.
Yeah, he's
Is he an elf
troll.
at all?
He's half elf, half troll.
Oh, I
Half
see.
elf, half troll.
Right.
How did that happen?
And crazy.
You have to
read
read
the
the
book.
story.
Okay,
Oh,
let's go to the phones.
Anyway, there's an Alex
Little
Raymond. That's
lights
not a
are
bad thing
flashing.
either.
ElfQuest, you're on the air.
Yes, first I'd like to say I have not ever gotten to black and white, but I very much enjoyed the two-color volumes.
Okay.
And I called earlier to answer your slow glass question, by the way.
Right.
And could you say just when the third volume is coming out?
What is our second most frequently asked question? the
Earlier on the air that it should have been out a week ago, but
Yes.
didn't say when it actually will be. Answer that, please.
Can't say when it actually will be. The publisher, the Donning Company, I think is hedging its bet by saying by Thanksgiving. I think it's going to be out earlier than that.
Mhm.
It was due under great pressure at the first of the month. So I think it's probably not much more than a week from now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Welcome.
you for calling. KPFK, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I have a question for Richard and Wendy. How come there aren't any, half elves, half humans?
Okay, that's a question we often get asked. I think it's kind of difficult to put it simply, but one of the things that we try to avoid in ElfQuest is the usual fantasy cliches. Halflings, that sort of thing, belong to another type of mythology than that which we're trying to do. Since we're trying to make a point about prejudice through the separateness of the human and elf races, we've carried that throughout the story, that there is a very definite separateness.
Okay, thanks. There's another one. I always wondered, when Berthold used to rip, go around taking all the, supposedly, the human babies and
Uh-huh.
leaving them off in the woods. I wonder whatever happened to them.
Well, sometimes he would give them the little babies that he would give them to the wolves to raise and then set them on their human tribes.
It would be weird, if they kind of, some of the ones that, the wolf kids met up with the wolf riders, right?
Well, those are stories for fans to speculate on. Send us some of your story ideas.
You might also try reading The Jungle Book by Rudyard
Oh,
Kipling.
yeah, I've read that.
When will Yearnings number 2 be out?
Actually, that will be out sometime in the first half of next year, because the people who are now running the fan club or who are doing the paste up and the typing and all of that have also taken over the production
Well, I've
of
read
Yearnings.
a lot of the jungle books. Well, thank you.
Thank you
welcome.
for calling. All right, let's go to our next call. KPFK, you're on the air.
Hi, I just wanted to call up and ask when the next issue of Elf.
Oh, whimper whine.
If you had been at Dangerous Visions this evening,
Yes.
you would have been able to pick it up. It was late coming back from the printer,
Oh, so
and
it's out.
Yeah.
it's out now.
Great, far out.
Yeah, are you a subscriber?
No, I just buy it when it comes out on the stand.
Okay, go to Dangerous Visions. They have some there still.
I'm not going to go all the way down there, shoot.
Oh,
You
well.
can find it.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I was, would you, what's that graphic novel you're going to be about?
Oh, you mean for Marvel?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have several in mind.
You really want to talk about this?
I don't really
In
know
public?
yet.
I don't know.
What are you implying?
No, I'm only implying.
It's secret?
Well, all I can say right now
George
is
Lucas
that
doesn't
it is.
tell anybody anything.
Oh, hush. It has yet to be fully discussed, and you'll know as soon as we know, okay?
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you for calling.
Yeah.
Hour 25, you're on the air with Wendy and Richard Pini. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about the very first high ones coming to the planet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to know, why did they come to that planet, and where was the point of origin? Because this is something that I find fascinating. science fiction and fantasy things where you have people going to other planets and then establishing it and living on it for certain generations.
He has to read the end of the story.
That is a question that a lot of people have asked, and that we do promise that we will answer because it's a very important part of the story.
Yeah.
However, we also never ever give anything away that will be a surprise, and that's an answer that comes in the last couple of issues. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to say just stick around for the last 3 issues, and you will be answered.
Okay, and another question: will you be covering in the history of about the High Ones and some other future works at all?
Oh, you mean more stories about the High Ones and how they survived after they came to this world, or before they came to this world?
Before they came to the world.
We're gonna cover that
Yeah.
in fair amount at the end of the story.
Yeah.
So that may be just what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the group of elves that landed on this planet are not the only elves. The original High Ones still are back wherever they came from, the first group came from. There's still another civilization?
Well, we won't tell you right or wrong because that has to do with the ending of the story.
Okay.
But let's just say that ElfQuest has survived 7 years of the most aggressive input from the readers that any fantasy has ever had to survive, and they haven't outguessed us yet.
Okay.
So
And some of them are pretty sharp.
you bet they are.
Have any of them come up with the answers, or at least proposed a scenario? Now, obviously, you're not going to say, and I don't want you to. Has anybody independently come up with what you're going to do?
Not to
No.
the very end of the story, but they have guessed certain incidents based on red herrings that we've dropped along
Oh,
the way.
good.
Two edges the other.
Thank you very much.
Two edges the other.
No, we do enjoy dropping clues all
Yes.
through the stories. There are clues that we dropped 3 and 4 years ago that are just being borne out now. There are clues that we have dropped that lead absolutely nowhere also.
As a
but
mystery writer, I'm familiar with that technique. Yes.
it's gratifying to get the letters from those fans who have read and understood what we're doing to such an extent that they say, oh yeah, I took this bit from that issue and that bit, and I guess that means that somewhere along the line this is going to happen. And when they do that, and it does turn out to be right, I said, son of a gun, there's a smart one.
ElfQuest isn't pure high fantasy. I would say it's more akin to a romance and a romance detective story, really, because that's the way it's being written. The elves are seeking the answer to who they are and what in the world they're doing on this world that seems so hostile to them. They don't feel that they really belong there, but if they don't belong there, where do they belong? And so this quest has taken them through, as they are led by Cutter, in this sort of random search, and they bump into clues here and there, and things fit together, and the readers find out what the elves find out at the same time.
How do you keep track? I mean, this seems all very complicated. Do you have a
Yes.
big chart
No.
or a book that you
We
have
have
at
the
home?
past issues.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have the
They
past
carry their
issues,
heads.
and you also have some stuff for the future, though.
The thing is
Is
that
that written in words? I suppose you have sketches, too.
there do exist plot synopses for the remaining issues,
Yes.
but the thing is that it started out so well realized, and each issue, the entire story gets a bit more realized, that by now, everything really is
If you've
carried
See-
in our
If
heads.
you've been living with something for 8 years, you got a pretty good idea
It's
of
true.
it without referring.
I'm the keeper of the plot, and Richard and I, when it's time to do a new issue of ElfQuest, sit down and have a story session, and I will give him the incidents that will occur in that issue, and then we hash it out, and Richard adds his own bits of seasoning and spice and incidents to the story and characterization and so forth, and after we've hashed it out, much like an animation story session, I'll sit down and write a script. Richard takes my script and edits it. And then the script comes back to me, and I do the lettering, I do the layouts, the pencils, the inks.
Oh, you do everything.
I do everything.
All
then,
the artwork.
And then it comes back to Richard, and he puts the package together as the publisher.
Really, my
How
God,
long does the
monumental.
process take from first script session to book in hand?
It's 4 months between issues. All of the work on a given issue will take between 2 to 2.5 of those months. And so if the next question is, well, why don't you come out more frequently than every 4 months? It's because there are novels, there are color books, there are a number of other projects that eat up that time also.
And also,
Which is, you've got to have downtime, or you'll be biting yourself in the back of the neck.
that's the one thing that, I think that's the one regret we have. We have made some errors in just spreading ourselves a little too thin. But we're human, and we've learned from this as well. There is very little recreation time for us. We have 3 more issues of ElfQuest to go. We are planning to finish it early so that we can reveal, premiere, whatever you want to say, our final issue at the Worldcon in '84.
Which will be right here in
Absolutely.
L.A.
Absolutely, and we'll have a big celebration, an ElfQuest party, the end of the quest.
Here, here.
But we're going to push ourselves to get it done, and then we're going to make some sense out of living again.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Hour 25, you're on the air.
Yeah, I would like to put a little input about the graphic novel. I want to put in my vote for Find the Daughter of Stone. Ever since I saw the picture of her in the gather room, I've been just paralyzed. I always wanted to know who she was, and she must be on the same world as the elves because there's a zoot she's sitting underneath and all that.
Well, actually, that was a misprint in the gather room. Thank you for bringing up the character, though. She's a little favorite of mine. The character's actual name was Veya, V-E-I-Y-A.
Okay.
The character Vaya that appears in ElfQuest, V-A-Y-A, is a different one altogether. It may very well happen, whether Warp Graphics does it or Marvel does it or something else happens with her, that she will appear before too very long in a story of some sort, whether it's a backup story for something else or whether we do actually do a graphic novel based on her. That she very definitely has a story, and it's
I thought so.
it's along an H. Rider Haggard theme rather than a fantasy. The fact that there was a Zwoot in one of the drawings that I did of Veya is because ElfQuest was very much on my brain at the time, and she just happened to be in that world at that time.
Oh, okay.
Are there plans for
Thank you for calling.
a second generation somewhere along the way? There was in one of the issues, there was a full-page drawing of Ember as an adult in battle armor.
That was a whimsy drawing.
Yeah, you can project.
The fans pick up on everything. Every word, every pen stroke they pick up on, and they absorb it and they assimilate it, and then they give it back to us.
Well,
And there's a great deal of what if in the little drawings and sketches and things that we do and say. Not everything that we publish is necessarily connected in a hard and fast way to the ElfQuest universe or to the ElfQuest story. So the particular drawing you're referring to, I wonder what she'd look like grown up.
Yeah.
And it was a piece of whimsy.
Yeah.
Hour 25, you're on the air with the ElfQuest creators.
Yes, earlier you mentioned that you were trying to make a point about prejudice in terms of using very wide differences. And I just wanted to mention that Star Trek, in one of their episodes, made a point about prejudice using very subtle differences. The episode where they had a person who was half black and another person who was half white.
That by you is subtle?
Yeah, I would debate as to whether that was subtle or not.
Well, when a person is, it was apparent, at least to the characters within Star Trek, other than these two individuals, that to them there didn't seem to be much difference. They were rather puzzled, at least initially.
I think I see your point. In other words, it would be the same as a brown-haired person being prejudiced against a black-haired person, right?
Sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
My perspective on it. I thought, I just wanted to add that to the stew.
Well,
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
thank you.
No, go ahead. If you have more to say to him, go ahead.
Well, prejudice and the many faces of it has been a thing that has troubled me ever since my childhood. I grew up in a town where 75% of the population was practically the migrant workers who came, and I saw as much hate and as much rivalry and as much bitterness going on as goes on back east, with the various different sub-flavors of humanity back there. And it's it's something that's always pained me and troubled me. I experienced prejudice in my own life because I was one of those types who is your typical fan type, an outsider, one who thinks differently, one who marches to a different drummer. And I began to think, well, if so many people have so much against me, maybe I've got something, you know, which is the only way someone who gets kicked around a lot can really stand up for themselves. And so it's just a theme that has continually appeared in most every story. Somehow. You know?
You did it by creating your own universe.
Well, I think I fit pretty well into this world, but...
No question about it.
But the creation of a universe allows the expression of all of that.
Yeah.
It's a tabula rasa that you can fill with whatever's inside of you.
And maybe I can help somebody else. I mean, you know, not to sound like all altruistic and everything, but I think that ElfQuest makes people feel good.
I think it does. If people wanted, who just coming into the middle, like me, who want to see the thing, where can they get back issues and so forth? Like that? Let's
Well,
do that.
one of the things that we have done, that Warp Graphics has done as a publisher, that, as far as I know, no other comics company does, is to keep all of the back issues in print continuously. So if you have access to a comics shop, they should have all of the issues. If they don't, they should be able to get them. If you don't have access to a comics shop, then you would either be getting ElfQuest by subscription or by a friend. But in each issue, we list the mail order outlets where anybody can write in for a catalog and get a price list, and all of these mail order outlets carry the entire line of ElfQuest back issues of the color books and so on and so forth. They are always available.
Good, so they are available. All right, let's go back to the phones. Hour 25, you're on the air.
Yeah, my name is Mark Nelson. I'm a friend of David's. He's rung me up several times here in Anaheim, and I've never returned his calls.
So you can do it on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Mark.
Because I can't afford it, and I've always felt bad about it.
He's honest.
I'm hoping to amend that. Anyway, I have a question. Is there any genuine money to be made in ElfQuest?
Not by you. I mean, no offense, but...
That depends on if the IRS is listening to this program.
Let me
Yes,
put it-
they are. I know someone who is and is.
No, we're not making a cent.
Okay, let me put it this way. Richard was working for IBM 3 years ago. IBM is one of the most secure jobs in the world. You can hardly get fired from it. And he was doing quite well. He was rising in the company, and he decided to quit that job and devote full time to ElfQuest. And thank you very much. We are doing very, very well.
So you are making, are you breaking even?
It started off, when we began to do ElfQuest, that was our goal, to break even, because we didn't want to lose money out of pocket, and we didn't have great expectations that it was going to sweep the world. It started off by breaking even.
When does ElfQuest the motion picture and the ElfQuest video game come out?
Well, as far as ElfQuest the motion picture, I'm going to say within 2 to 3 years. As far as the video game, that's unknown right now, because we have not been approached by anybody that we would want to do a video game.
I'm not sure that a video game is possible for ElfQuest. It's so much more than zap the other electron figure.
There are always possibilities.
Well, now see, that's sort of a problem, because ElfQuest, as a story, has its own thematic integrity, and it's difficult to turn it into a, zap that troll and win that treasure kind of a
True, but
motivation.
it's not impossible to turn it into something akin to an adventure, as witness. A group called us up some while ago and wanted us to consider doing the do-it-yourself adventures that you can buy, these thin paperbacks where you turn to page 46 if you choose this,
Maybe
and 48
the format
if you
for
do
an
that.
ElfQuest game is like Dragon Slayer, a
possibility.
Laserdisc animated video game where you make the choice and the computer hunts over to the appropriate track on the Laserdisc. And
That's
But
possible.
just to wrap up the question, ElfQuest began making more money than just breaking even relatively early, and it is doing well enough for us so that we can expand to other magazines, that we can look at other projects, and so that I could leave IBM and have it support both of us.
There's always ElfQuest land.
They're working on that.
Yeah, we discussed Warp World earlier.
Right.
I'd like to state parenthetically that I always thought the most amazing thing about Star Trek was the basic idea that man has finally achieved peace and so forth and so on. I always thought that they should do that movie, the movie about how mankind was able to establish peace.
Good luck, Charlie.
I personally see prejudice slipping away around me. People getting more permissive. We have,
How about tolerant instead of permissive? Wouldn't tolerant be a better word?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
There you go. See, I'm
more
burying myself.
More power to tolerance.
Yeah.
I think that possibly if there's only two ways to go, either we'll all kill ourselves or we will.
Or we won't.
I used to dislike minorities myself when I was a child until I found it. And I always wondered what the reason was until I realized there wasn't one.
But it's nothing you should feel guilt about, because how can you understand what's wrong and what's right unless you've experienced both sides? We've all experienced prejudice. You can't talk about a thing or analyze it unless you felt it.
Well, I still dislike Nazis, and I hope they are in the minority.
Okay, thank you for calling. All right, let's go take our last call here. Hour 25, you're on the air.
Yes, I got two questions. One is, I've got so many questions. Is there any place that you're appearing in Southern California, like at a comic book convention, where you might be able to meet the public or the fans or something like that? And the second one is, as a closet comic collector for many years, Marvel and DC Comics, it seemed like ElfQuest came out a few years back, and that just like opened everything up. Then so many other comics, Cerebus and so many others came out away from the normal Marvel and DC Comics. And now I feel like I'm out of the closet. I can keep some of this stuff on my coffee table. To get into it. It's amazing. I'd like to ask where you think the industry is going along those lines.
Well, okay, to answer your first question, we do, one or both of us, try to get to as many conventions as we can do, subject to restrictions of economics and health and so on and so forth. And we list those in each issue of ElfQuest as to where one or both of us will be, so you can check the issues and find out where we're going to be. There are a lot of factors that determine where we'll be and when we'll be somewhere and why we'll be there. And it's just check the listing. With respect to your second question, one of the things that we are most proud of in having done and doing ElfQuest is that we were there at the beginning. In 1977, the independent comic market almost did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
We came out in that year. There were only a couple of others just starting to get off the ground in that year. Bud Plant's First Kingdom was one, Cerebus the Aardvark was another. But ElfQuest was the first one to make a very large splash in the direct sales market. We were the first independent comic to sell in what was for that time very large figures. So therefore we were the first to demonstrate that money could be made at doing this independent thing. Since then, of course, as you said, there have been more and more independent publishers, which has caused great and small shakeups in the mainstream publishers, so that now you have everybody competing along with everybody else for the talent and for the skills of the artist, which is a good thing because competition only helps. Where I think we see the industry going is that there has been such a proliferation of new comics companies, of new product, that there's a little bit of a fear that there's so much product that the market will become glutted and there will be an implosion just as there was an explosion. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe the market will find its own level.
More optimistically, I think a trend just in the content of comics will be towards material that's better structured and better ingested by a wider audience than comics currently reach. In Europe and Japan, comics enjoy a status as adult entertainment form that they do not enjoy here in America. Here in America, as you pointed out earlier yourself, you feel that you can't put your comics on the coffee table. But I believe that this is changing. I believe that the independent comics movement has begun to contribute to this change, and I believe that comics are going to be perceived more and more in America as an art form, as they rightly should be.
and I think what you've done with a strong storyline and strong artwork together is just tremendous. And like I said, I was able to get so many people that hadn't read a comic book in 10 years. Do you have any recent appearances here in California, or did I just miss you, or are you leaving now, or?
We are in the Los Angeles area through Sunday. We're doing store signings at, well, as I said, we did the Dangerous Visions this evening. We're doing Heidi Ho in Santa Monica tomorrow and Andromeda in Santa Barbara Sunday. Then we will be heading northward. And
I look forward to trying to see you then.
As far as the next convention in this area, I believe that will be in the summertime of next year. Every year in San Diego, there is a major comics convention, and we will, in all probability, be at that one.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
for calling.
That was a great last question.
Well, only the last few minutes. We've got a couple of minutes yet, and I want to ask, did you, when you started this, foresee what was going to happen, or was it just...
Oh, if we had, we would have crawled into a hole and never... I mean,
Do you think so, or is it one of those things that had to be done regardless of cost and regardless of emotional and...
Luckily, we couldn't see it, because in the beginning it was a story that just wanted out, and we were happy to accommodate it, because I think we were a little caught up in the beginning. We used to like to say, oh yeah, the elves live with us, and they have breakfast with us, and they run around the house, and so on and so forth. And we've grown beyond that in doing this.
Now they only have dinner.
Now they only have dinner,
That's
and they
right.
spend their days outside.
we've done our best to get them as far out of the house as possible.
They don't play
because
with the
of-
vacuum cleaner anymore.
No.
or anything.
They got
Yeah,
jobs and,
that's right.
and good jobs and babysitting.
Saving up to buy their own wolf.
Just as they have lost a certain amount of their innocence about the quest that they're on, we have lost a certain amount of innocence about the business that we're involved in, publishing and drawing and writing and doing and creating. It's not easy work necessarily. In fact, more and more, it's difficult work.
Also, as a husband and wife team, we have found that we, for the past 7 years, have been under some severe strains that I think that many marriages would be hard-pressed to survive. But what we've done is to realize that there are actually 4 entities living in our house: the artist and the publisher, and the husband and the wife. And when artist and publisher don't see eye to eye, the husband and wife can come in and take over, and the artist and publisher can go away for a while, and those two people can get along together.
And if we'd known that those stresses, those tensions were going to exist to the degree that they sometimes have, we might not have. But we got caught up in it, and we committed ourselves to it, and have always intended to honor the commitment all the way through to the end. And I think that has helped us grow also, that in spite of everything else, we keep on pushing.
Would you like to mention the letter you got from Ursula Le Guin? That might be a good closing
Well,
item.
I think she was very kind. I don't know whether or not she really read ElfQuest thoroughly or even remembers that she wrote us, but she wrote a very charming essay called From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, in which she was taking to task certain trends that she perceived in the writing of fantasy literature. And so we sent her our first few issues of ElfQuest and said, see, there are elves in Poughkeepsie.
That's right, and it is a real place. It does exist, and just like those that live in Cleveland and Oxnard and Oshkosh, we're proud
I like
to be
what Howard the Duck said. You know, how could demons and wizards not exist in a place with a name like Cleveland?
Of course. So how could elves not exist in Poughkeepsie?
That's right.
Well, we have been talking tonight with 2 of them, Wendy and Richard Pini,
Look at those ears. They both
Who
have
are-
hair over their ears.
who are
Who knows
creators
what's real?
of ElfQuest, and have learned at the same time, to use a word they mentioned before, self-quest. And thank you both for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet and enjoy the books and the creators.
Thank you.
And David Close, thank you for being guest host on this one.
Mine? No?
All right. Next
Yes.
week, Mel. Next week.
My week, at
This
last.
week.
Yeah.
We'll speak with a man who's written a book about the films of James Bond.
Ba-dum,
So all of you.
I'm going to bring music. That's a threat. I have all these albums of James Bond music, and if we run out of things to say, we can always play music.
So next week the show will be sponsored by Universal Import Export.
Yes, and John Barry will be here in spirit, if not the flesh.
Oh, I hope so.
We will see you next week. Good night, and thank you very much for listening.